think about the $12.9 billion of your money Goldman received through the backdoor AIG bailout, paid 100 cents on the dollar under an order from the New York Federal Reserve, chaired at the time by your friendly neighborhood Treasury Secretary, Tim Geithner. Who needs an investigation? This doesn't sound like it needs an investigation to me at all. Speaking of cash, Goldman bosses maintain that the company lost money as a result of the hedge fund deal that the SEC calls outright fraud. How does whether you make or lose money cheating have anything to do with it? In a long rebuttal, to the suit, I should say, the firm claims it actually took a $90 million hit. But even bigger than that, Goldman says it didn't sell investments that were doomed to fail in the first place. The boss is maintaining that the whole thing was nothing more than a natural disaster, an unanticipated event, out of their hands. How could it be? Remember this?
How would you look at the risk of a hurricane? The season after we had 4 hurricanes on the East Coast, which was absolutely extraordinary, versus the year before. Rates got very low for risk premia.
Acts of God will exempt. These were acts of men and women.
But Mr. Blankfein, as you and I both know, this is no Icelandic volcano. You and your Wall Street buddies created a disaster that has left Americans out of work, stripped of their savings, stuck in mortgages they cannot afford, and paying for your wild gambling sprees, which may well be littered with fraud. And despite Goldman's considerable influence in D.C., if we continue to see more evidence of fraud, not just at Goldman, but everywhere, victory in this so-called war that Goldman has declared on this government of ours may not come so easily. In fact, other countries who have done business with Goldman Sachs are already lining up their own investigations. Countries like Germany, Greece, and England. Remember, the sucker for the Goldman Sachs salesman is the pension fund manager and municipal governments seeking that little extra juice, that little extra return that only Goldman claimed they could offer. But do not be too aggressive with them. It's not just Goldman. The dominoes are lining up for others who may have done the exact same thing, in fact. Questions being raised about Merrill Lynch and Lehman Brothers. Remember those repo 105s? Governor Spitzer helped us so elegantly to represent our ability to hide our risk when the regulators were in town. All of them disasters for sure. There's Governor Spitzer's head right there. He's here. But natural, they were not. The proof in the email trails and the prospectuses for each and every last one of these secret derivative agreements. Take a look at the S&P ratings agent who said, quote, "Let's hope we're all wealthy and retired by the time this house of cards falters." Of course, the ratings agents were the ones certifying these investments as AAA immediately prior to their collapse in the hands of your pension. If these are crimes, who are the victims? As you know by now, unfortunately, the answer is most of us. If these are crimes, what can we do to solve them? Joining us now, former New York governor and the sheriff of Wall Street when he was attorney general in this state, Eliot Spitzer, and Congressman Jim Himes, a Democrat from Connecticut, a former vice president at Goldman Sachs, both men intimately familiar with the financial theories, their benefits and detriments, and how we might proceed forward. Nice to see both of you. How are you?
Good to see you, Bill.
Where would you begin the process of uncovering this investigation? We can jump to a lot of conclusions, but obviously we don't have all the information yet.
Well, the first thing I'd want to know is whether Goldman's defense that this was pervasive is in fact the case. In other words, how many other products like this were constructed with the assistance of a Paulson or somebody else who wanted it to decline in value? It's not a legal defense, it's not even an ethical defense, but it would be a fact worth knowing.
Yeah. Do you have any sense of that, Jim? When you look at, if I was to call you as a broker at Goldman Sachs and say, listen, I've picked 15 of these securities, they're all crap, I think they're all crap, I'm a short seller, can you make me a synthetic basket that will basically allow me to bet on their decline? There's nothing illegal about that. That's a perfectly valid relationship. The question is, once you've made that basket for me, are you telling him as your customer, hey, I've made Dylan this basket of crap he requested, do you want to buy it? Or is there a misrepresentation in that second transaction, not only in the case of Goldman Sachs, but throughout the entire too-big-to-fail banking system? Do you have any sense of that?
Well, I mean, this is the question that is going to be resolved ultimately by the court. And it's interesting, Goldman's defense that this was pervasive pervasive, that in and of itself deserves to be unpacked. You know, it may be legal, illegal, fraudulent, non-fraudulent, but if it was pervasive, look, Wall Street evolved over a period of a couple of decades from serving the Procter & Gambles of the world to serving their clients to really taking huge bets. Now, we can talk about whether that makes sense or not. One thing we know is that taking huge bets when you're doing it with an implicit government guarantee simply does not work. So I'm interested in, was it pervasive, and if so, how can we make sure that we insulate the bet takers, the gamblers, from any sort of implicit or explicit government guarantee?
The Congressman is so right. If, in fact, Goldman is correct, its defense could be their undoing. The fact that it's pervasive will dictate more fundamental change on Wall Street, and the greatest threat they face is not from this litigation. It's more existential than that. The public right now is saying, what do these guys do that is useful to us in terms of growing our economy? The sort of synthetics they're creating here, this is pure casino idiocy. This doesn't help us as our economy is imploding. China's becoming the biggest market in every sense possible, and yet we are subsidizing investment bankers to do this. It makes no sense.
There are so many questions and so many different narratives we can all create in our own head as to how it might be, how it might have been. Are they all doing this? Is nobody doing this? Was this a one-off? I don't know. How do we get access, Congressman, to more information, period? So whether it's journalists like myself, politicians like you, or pundits like the former governor here can make more informed and more intelligent decisions to help our country going forward, as opposed to simply satisfying whatever your emotional predisposition may be and what you want to believe that day. How do we get more information?
Well, one of the things that is going to come out of this process with the SEC is an awful lot more of airing of exactly what happened inside these investment banks. And look, don't think for a second that this is just Goldman Sachs. I happen to believe that what they say is true, that this was fairly pervasive.
I agree with you.
And we should be concerned about that. The other thing we need to do is to pass good, compelling financial regulatory reform which drags these markets, which heretofore have traded, you know, in the shadows, into exchanges, onto clearinghouses, so that all of us, regulators and the market, gets to take a look at who's taking this kind of risk.
And something the Congressman alluded to at the end of his last comment, we should not be giving government taxpayer-backed guarantees to entities like Goldman or anybody else who are then using those guarantees to structure crazy bets like this. The guarantees should be given to those who are taking deposits to turn that money around, invest it in job-creating housing or industry, not for these synthetic constructs that do nothing for the country.
Doesn't Wall Street exist basically for one singular reason, which is to provide a place where money can find the best ideas in our country and develop them and grow them, either by investing, so you and I are side by side and we're like, let's get long this idea, we'll make a BlackBerry or whatever it is, or you can lend me some money so that I can go out and try and do that. And if you're not doing one of those two things, why does the government subsidize those businesses, and can we tell who's doing what at this point because of the complexity of these banks?
Well, that's exactly right. That's why Wall Street and the entire financial services sector exist, to take people who have money and to put it into the hands of startup companies and in the hands of families that want to send their kids to college. But as I said before, the model evolved, right? The model evolved in the direction of a casino. Let's take huge bets. Let's take very, very big bets. You know, it's not so much serving our, you know, corporate or sovereign clients anymore. It's, I think that the mortgage market is going to hell in a handbasket, and I'm going to put a lot of money on that. That not only didn't contribute to the start of a new Microsoft or a new Google, it actually brought down the economy and took $17 trillion worth of household wealth with it.
Governor, go ahead.
Well, as I said, we need more Silicon Valley, less Wall Street. Silicon Valley is where the congressman's sort of paradigm for economic, what we call financial intermediation, is happening. That's where money is flowing to creative ideas, new businesses, and what Wall Street has done is figure out how to squeeze money out of a stone by unfortunately creating these crazy products and then creating a betting system which they win with other people's money, with our financial guarantee and backup. It simply doesn't make sense anymore.
We got to take you two on the road. Congressman Jim Himes, wonderful. Thank you so much. Former governor of the state of New York, former sheriff of Wall Street. You're still the sheriff of Wall Street, Governor. We'll give it. You can keep the badge. Elliot Spitzer coming up here on the Dylan Ratigan Show, creating the $50 billion